السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, today we're going to look at the beginning of a topic which really our community needs a lot of upskilling in. Let me make it very clear from the outset, this is not where the Imam tells the congregation off. This is not having a go. This is upskilling, and we need a lot of upskilling in this area. The ayah that I recited, the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, the topic, the issue of marriage. So because time is short, unfortunately it's always short, let us begin by a real incident, real life incident that happened. And while I'm telling you about this incident, I want you to reflect, what do you think the point from the incident is going to be? I know brothers, you're going to go into the wrong direction, and I know sisters, you're going to get worried, but relax, okay? And just think about what the point, the main point of this incident actually is. So I'm sure that every single one of you has heard of the great and late Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala. Someone who filled the earth in terms of the hadith science. Science related to the sayings, actions and tacit approvals or disapprovals of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A very known scholar, very famous scholar. And if you don't know who he is, he has become a reference point in the science of hadith. And there's nothing after the Quran that comes close to this science. So just imagine, he has an issue with his family, his wife. And they are quite late in their marriage now. They have children, they have a family. And this is someone who's been scholarly for all of his life. And she's complaining that, hang on, it's too much work for me. You get guests coming to the house any moment, unannounced, and I have to deal with it. I have to not only deal with the normal house chores, but all of these guests coming at all hours of the day and night. And I'm meant to look after them, and I'm meant to make sure everything's in place. Not to mention the children and the house chores in general, which are so many. Things that every wife would say. No difference. And then Sheikh Albani is telling her, hang on, but this has been my life from the beginning. It's not changed. This is what you were expecting, and this is what you lived, and now you're complaining about it. You can't handle it anymore. This is unacceptable. So they have their to and fro, and they can't sort out matters themselves. So they both agree to bring another scholar who will judge between them. And the scholar they bring is Sheikh Adnan Al-Ar'ur. They bring him, and he's going to judge. And they both agreed that he will judge between us. So he comes in, and he takes his seat to judge between them. And then he begins by saying, okay, sister, you begin. Now this is unacceptable to Sheikh Albani, because he's the plaintiff. He's the one who's complaining. He's the one who's meant to go first. So he says, what are you doing? What kind of hukm of Allah is this? You start with the wrong person? He says, no, this is what I'm doing. So he lets the wife complain. She says everything she has been holding inside herself from the beginning of her marriage until that moment. Everything. And he listens. And he doesn't interrupt until she's finished. So now she's finished. He says, right, I'm going to judge now. I'm going to rule. Sheikh Albani now, before he was annoyed, now he is fuming. A simple principle that every judge knows is that you can't make a judgment until you've heard both sides of the story. And he's only heard one side. So Sheikh Albani starts to interrupt and says, what kind of ruling is this? What kind of sharia is this? This is not just. You can't do this. The Sheikh says to him, no, this is the way I'm going to do it. You called me. If you like it, good, or I leave. Sheikh Albani not happy, but he calls someone to judge between them by the hukm of Allah and His Messenger. So he says, fine, go ahead. So now the judge starts. He turns to the wife, he turns to the husband, he turns to Sheikh Albani, who filled the earth with knowledge of Islam, and he says, I judge that you are the oppressor. You can imagine the wife's face, beaming with joy and happiness. And then he increases that and he says, and I judge, sister, that you are the oppressed one. You've been oppressed. And then he says, so you can imagine the wife now. Everything's going her way. And then he says to both of them, my judgment is that because of all of this work that he is putting on you and you can't deal with all of it, he has to bring a second wife who's going to help you fix the issues. That was the conclusion. That was the hukm. She turns around, her face is completely changed, and she says, no, I have another solution. And this solution involves dealing with all of it, and we don't need to go down this road. And then they come to an agreement, and they continue their marital life until he, rahimahullah, passes away, rahimahullah ta'ala. Now brothers, the issue was not polygamy. Sisters, don't be worried. We're not talking about polygamy. We're dealing with our marriages current. Nothing else. Okay? Right. What's the point of the story? Or the incident? Because it's not made up. It's real. Okay, if you search YouTube in Arabic, you'll find the sheikh who was judging, talking about it himself. So it's something that is very well known. Now the point is, every single human being is going to have these problems. Everyone who goes through marriage is going to have these issues. Issues that you can't resolve between yourselves. And you will need a neutral third party to come into. That's the point. That is not undignified. That is not a blemish on your characters. That is nothing except normal human behavior and need. That's what it is. You can't, as a deficient human being, deal with all issues, even with the closest person to you, your husband or your wife. It's as simple as that. We are an ummah who is the greatest ummah that has ever been raised for mankind. We are the leaders of mankind. That is our rightful place because we have something that no ummah has. The Quran and its explanation in detail, which means we know how to deal with every situation that will ever occur until we return back to Allah. This is why we are the leaders of mankind. But we're not going to attain this leadership for mankind if we don't sort out our families. What's happening now means that you cannot behave like your parents behaved. We are not like our parents. We have been influenced by un-Islamic principles, thought and practices, because that's what we live amongst. That's what we're fed by the media. We are not those same people. Our wives, our women folk are not the same as our mothers because they've gone through a similar influencing. And we don't know the Sharia well enough to actually fight off those influences and deal with things the way Allah wants. So that's why we need upskilling. Because if we don't have strong, stable, established, loving families, we will never have the ummah that will lead mankind. You look around you right now, the world may have progressed, but the reason for their progression to this point and all the advancement you see is off the back of stable families of the past. Now they're going down a road that is an abyss. Society is going through a decay and falling apart because families are no longer important and are falling apart. We cannot be part of that. We are the ones who need to lead the way in bringing back moral values that bind people together, not split them apart. So how do we upskill? So let us first begin by our reference point, our aims and objectives. What is the purpose of marriage in the first place? Why do we need to understand this? Because if you understand the aims, the objectives of marriage, and you put that in your mind, you will be able to deal with the challenges in the right way. And if you don't, you're just going to be as bad as anyone else out there without the guidance of Allah and His Messenger. And we can't have that. We are Muslims. We are Muslims. We are the leaders of this world. We are the leaders of humanity. That's who we are. We need to live up to it. So number one, it's no secret. Everything in a Muslim's life is not about the self. That's the people out there, the non-Muslims. Egocentric, selfish, all of this self-love business. No. The believers are the ones who love Allah more than they love everything else. They understand. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين. Say my prayer, my sacrifice, my life and my death is only for Allah. He has no partner. And I am from the foremost of the believers, the Muslims. This is our life. That's what marriage is about. It's part of your life in obedience to Allah. That's the first thing. Now if you think about this, then the second point, marriage is actually about raising righteous progeny, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and a whole line who worship Allah and establish Allah's will on this earth. That's what marriage is about. So that's number 2 in our objectives as Muslims. In marriage, our marriages. Number 3, chastity. Not falling into the haram when it comes to our desires. In Islam, there is only one way for us to fulfill our desires, our lusts, our physical lusts. That is through marriage. Man and woman get married, and that is the only halal way to fulfill these desires that every one of us has. So if you're doing that, and understand that that's the third point, then you should be thinking, where does the self come into it then? Because it's not number 1, it's not number 2, it's not even number 3. Where's that thing that I have in my head that marriage is meant to be about enjoying each other's company and having that companionship and laughing together and enjoying life? That's number 4. Right at the bottom there. Number 4 of the objectives of marriage. Not number 1, 2, 3, but 4. Right at the bottom. So even if you don't have it, that marriage can still be good. If it's about Allah, you're raising righteous children, you're fulfilling each other's intimate rights, it's still a good marriage. You might not have the perfection of it, but most of it is there, 3 out of 4. You still have a good marriage. And if you think about it, if you put these things in your mind, this is what marriage is meant to be about, you'll be prepared to handle much more and deal with things when they're not going right. If I was to ask you simply about number 2, how much would you sacrifice for your children? How much? Every parent would say, I'd give my life for my children. And it's not a mere statement. A parent would. Instinctively, you would. You would save them from danger. You would get in the way. You would die making sure that they live. Every parent, without thinking. It's innate. But hang on, there's something greater than your children. There's Allah. Allah and His Messenger. That was number 1. Children were number 2. Righteous children, not any old children. And chastity was the 3rd. So think about it like this, and you'll be able to handle much more difficult situations and get through them. These are just challenges of life. Part and parcel of life. If you don't have the perfect marriage, the world's still going to move. It's not the end of it. Qiyamah has not been established. It shouldn't defeat you as a human being, as a Muslim. It's just part of your life, not all of it. Now, I want to deal with a couple of other issues very, very quickly and in some detail. Now, a lot of people, they come to us, because this is something I deal with day in, day out at the Islamic Council of Europe. And I started actually when I became Imam of this masjid. Really dealing with the problems of the community and marriages, probably for me in my life, started when I was Imam full-time here in this masjid. Now, a lot of people come and say, we've got communication issues. We don't talk. We don't spend time together. They think it's about being able to talk to one another. And especially the sisters. Yeah, number 1 thing they say, communication. Why? They're just getting on with their tasks and their chores, and they hardly spend any time with each other. But you know what? The underlying issue is not the communication itself. It's actually, there's no love left. They've upset each other so much and for so long that they just want to get on with things apart. That's the problem. And you know, love. Love is not some newfangled idea about marriage from non-Muslims. When Allah talks about the basis of marriage, He does not say that marriage is about rights and responsibilities. It's not. He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. In Surah Rum, Allah tells us the crux of marriage. It's about showing love, not love. Listen carefully. Mawaddatan, showing love to one another. And then rahmah, compassion, mercy on one another. Any household that you find that is a righteous household, from top to bottom, the common denominator in that family is that the crux of it is built on love. Everyone in that family feels loved by the other members of that family. Go and search, go and research. This is what you'll find. A household full of love for one another breeds righteousness, breeds excellence. And when there's no love and showing love, it breeds an abyss, a pit of hate and recklessness and misery. So how do we adopt this love and bring it? You know, I could quote to you how the Prophet ﷺ did it, but we don't have time for that. So I'm going to summarize it, and this is, brothers, this is something, especially as Asians. We as Asian men are very bad at doing this. The sisters, they could rattle this off to you like we know Fatiha. Yeah, this is what they read about, this is what they're waiting for. But this is for us to upskill ourselves. There's something called the 5 love languages. Yeah, when you forget the number, you just put up your hand, 5. You can't forget that. It's all about love, Allah said, mawaddatan. And the last thing, language. Communicate it, because it's about showing love. How do you show love? Number 1, praise. Simple as that, praise. Now you think about it. Us, in our marriages, do we praise each other or do we critique and criticize each other? Just imagine 15 years of critiquing someone. Sisters, you need to listen as well. This is both. Just imagine if all of your spouse hears from you is, that's no good, you're no good, you done that wrong. And that's what they hear for 15 years. The damage that is done through those statements, yeah, they're just words. But once they're in the heart, it's like the example, you take a fence. You bang in nails for 15 years. You got all those holes. At one point you could decide, you know what, I need to take out these nails. You try to take them out. And then you notice it's full of holes. Okay? Yeah, there's filler for the walls, there's filler for wood and fences. Have you heard of a filler for the hearts? Once you break the hearts to this extent, very difficult or impossible to fill them and mend them. Very difficult, almost impossible. So you think about it. So I want you to think, when was the last time I praised my spouse? And a qaida, a principle that I want you to adopt. If you're going to critique something about your spouse, praise them 3 times first. Sandwich it in praise, and 3 times as much praise as critique and criticism. That's going to keep the love between you. And I want you to just think about this one thing. And this is especially us Asian men. Because this is not normal for us. This is not what we know. This is not innate for us. I was a young man at the time, yeah? Without any white hair. I wasn't even married at the time. I'm traveling with a sheikh of mine to his office. We're engrossed in a conversation for half an hour about usul al-fiqh. Very technical Islamic stuff. High level Islamic conversation for half an hour. And then his phone rings and it's his wife. You know, us, what would we do? We'd ignore her. We'd let her phone back about 5 times. And then when it's just about to cut off, we may pick up. And when we pick up, we're thinking in our heads, woman, why are you phoning me? You know I'm busy. I'm busy doing things that are work and pressures and everything else. And then the only thing you want to do is get her off the phone. Well, this sheikh, He picked up the phone immediately. And then the joy in his voice showed her, and the words that he used, he expressed it must be an Eid, that she's surprised calling him when this is not the norm. And there must be something that's going on. He made her feel like she's the most valuable person in the world. A wife can do that, a husband can do that. Just with words of praise. So you imagine, whatever the problem was, now your spouse has put you on top of the world. You can deal with whatever challenge comes. But if you use that tongue to critique them and knock them down, then even the smallest challenge they face is like a huge mountain. The power of words. That's what we do to each other. We critique until we kill the love between ourselves. So that was number one, praise. Number two, quality time. You know, we all know the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he stands with Aisha radiallahu anha, and she is leaning with her chin on the blessed shoulder of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, watching the Abyssinians do their war practices in the masjid. That was quality time. She's leaning on the Prophet ﷺ. What she wants to do, he gave up his time, his precious time. The leader of mankind, the leader of the world, the leader of the people of paradise. He gave it up. Let her watch to her heart's content. And she's touching his shoulder. Her head, her chin on his shoulder. And she knows everyone's going to hear about this incident. And we're still hearing about it. And we will hear about it until Yawm al-Qiyamah. Shows love. Simple thing like that, yes. Quality time. Not engaged in the phone. Not engaged with the tablet. Not giving precedence to friends or family. No. One another, engage with each other. That's number two. Quality time. Number three, gifts. The Prophet ﷺ made it very clear. Tahabbu. Tahabbu. Give gifts to one another and you will love one another. This is known. It doesn't have to be expensive. It is the thought that counts. You thought of me. Both sides. Then another one. And sisters, you need to pay careful attention to this one. The next love language, number 4, is intimacy. Intimacy. Now you think, sisters, the next time shaitan comes to you and say, you know what, you've got too many things to do today, and your husband wants time, and you're thinking, oh, then the shower and then everything else and the children and the housework, and you think, no, not now, I'm busy. When you do that, you are killing the love between you. You need to understand, I shouldn't have to quote the hadith. Your husband shouldn't have to quote the hadith. Intimacy is so core to the marriage that without it, the marriage crumbles. And brothers need to take the same mindset. If you deny your spouse the halal, then when they commit the haram, and I'm telling you, if you deny them the halal, shaitan will push them in the direction of the haram. And you will be part of the fault. You will bear part of that burden and sin. Not a justification. We are human beings. If there is no halal, then people will commit the haram. Allah did not prohibit us from something except He gave us a halal version of it. And the last thing in this aspect is, after all of this, number 5 is acts of service. Do things for one another. And brothers, when your wife says, this needs fixing, that needs doing, don't say, I'll get round to it. Don't say, I'll do it. Say, I will do it on this day when I have time, and then make sure you fulfill it. And likewise, sisters, take the same strategy. Because if you don't, what happens? They just think, they say they're going to do it and they never do it. Why should I trust them? I can't rely on them. And then it goes worse. Why do I even need them? They don't even do anything for me. Why are they around? Why are they around? I need to get rid of them. That's how it goes. This is shaitan's work. Very, very precise. And it's happening so much in our ummah right now. Because we don't live by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim. The Muslims stick to their word. You know, Muslims were known to live by their word. That is our reputation. That is Islam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. In finishing off, we will all have issues between us and our spouse, man and woman. How do we resolve them? Number one, it is not by standing there in front of the rest of the family, shouting and screaming, trying to make yourself dominant over the other person. Husband, brothers, it is not by saying, didn't you hear the Prophet ﷺ said, if someone should bow down to another, it should be the wife bowing to the husband. Doesn't solve anything. Doesn't mean you should be listened to all the time. You might actually be wrong. Okay? A mufti is not allowed to judge in his own cases. You know why? Every one of us in our own issues is biased. You are compromised. You can't. You are unable. This is not Islam. Islam doesn't let you. There's a conflict of interest. The buzzwords of today. So you can't judge in your own matters. What does that mean then? Right, number one, you have an issue. Someone shouting and screaming. The other party, you know what? Calm down. Relax. It's not the end of the world. Let them get it out of their system. Sometimes people need to do that. If one is doing it, don't bring shaitan in and you do it too. Yeah, the best thing is control yourself, manage yourself. Don't have these outbursts. Just say, I'm upset about this, we need to talk about it. Stop. Leave it at that. Then set a time when there's no one and you're all calm. It might take a week. But set that time when everyone is calm, where you can sit down, discuss it more objectively. Sit there, listen to the other side to understand where they're coming from. And then come to an agreement. This should be our norm. Our children should see this. So they get used to the idea. In life, when you have problems, you calm down, you talk about it, you come to an agreement, and then you follow. That's it. You imagine how many things we would sort out in people's lives if we just maintained this strategy. That should be our norm. Then there will be issues that you can't agree on. What do you do there? Just like Sheikh Al-Albani did. You bring in a qualified, Islamically qualified person who can judge between you. Qualified person that you both agree on, and let them be the judge. Pour it out in front of them. And this, brothers, when your wife says to you, we need marriage counselling, listen to what Allah said. إِنَّمَا كَانَ قَوْلَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذَا دُعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَهُمْ. When the believers are called for judgment from Allah and His Messenger between themselves, they have only one statement. أَن يَقُولُوا سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. They say, we'll hear and we obey. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ. They are the successful ones. It doesn't diminish your authority as a husband. It doesn't mean that your dignity is being exposed. No, you're going to choose someone who's qualified, who's going to keep your issues private, confidential, 100%. No one will know about it. And justice will be established. And remember, the person is going to judge by Allah and His Messenger's book and guidance. So justice will be done, whether for you or against you. Yeah, remember Sheikh Al-Albani? Yeah, he was laughing at the end. And his wife was laughing too. That's what we want. We don't want the breaking of marriages. So as I said, this is the first installment of an upskilling that our community needs in this issue. May Allah give us tawfiq. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad. كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداء الدين يا قوي يا عزيز يا جبار يا متين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وقوموا إلى صلاتكم يرحمكم الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
تراصوا تقاربوا يعتدلون. Stand close together, don't leave any gaps. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. Allahu Akbar. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Brothers, as you're leaving, there's a collection going on for the flood victims, those who are suffering in Bangladesh. Local brothers are going to be taking the charity to the victims and those who are suffering out there. So please donate generously. Jazakumullah khairan. Can people also pray the sunnah at home so the second Jum'uah can come in? Jazakumullah khairan.